indication of what the cost estimates are going to be when you do the submission. So you can't just submit this and there are no costs that have been calculated. So it means at this stage, people must have brought on board professional teams like your quantity surveyors and architects and so forth that are going to begin putting this information together, town planners. John, did you want to say something?
Yeah, no, I am just wanting to sensitize you that there is a hand up. Busisiwe Ntombela.
Oh.
If you can unmute, ma'am, and come through with your question or comment.
What's it? Busisiwe?
Busisiwe? Yeah.
Busisiwe, will you ask your question?
Oh, yes. Okay. Morning. Thanks, Sharon. My first question is answered now about the people that are in our provinces that can assist us. So my second question is that when we are doing this compliance, applying for accreditation, did they counter your grade as we know that in the construction there's some grade, or because we are not say in big grade? So what about us? Are we still allowed to yes, yeah, to participate in that thing?
Okay, that's
interest.
Yeah, that's an important question. Do not confuse this process with your CIDB grading. Now, your CIDB grading is as a contractor, it means you can build if you're a 7, whatever the value of the construction is. This is a completely different process. Say you are a contractor, right? And you want to then get a project, right? You want to get a project accredited and you want to come on board as a private delivery agent, right?
Yes.
You're not going to be an SHI, but you want to do a development. Now, this is the process that you must follow. But on my next slides, I am going to show you if you're a private developer, you can be anybody. You can be a construction company. It can be me. And I'm saying, no, I'm a private developer. I own land. I don't necessarily need to be a construction company, but I can get people to develop my piece of land. Do you see what I'm saying? Yes. There are certain criteria as a private developer that I would need to submit. So your CIDB grading is a totally different thing. It's not even considered. It only comes into consideration when the value of the project goes out, either as a SHI. When you advertise your project for contractors, you will say on your tender documents, I'm looking for a CIDB 8 or 9, depending on the value now, to deliver this particular project. It will be on your tender adverts. That's a totally different process, but it doesn't stop you. They're not going to look at your CIDB now if you want to get a project accredited. Your CIDB will get looked at construction. Do you see?
Okay. No, I understand.
So
Thank you for
does that clarify? Okay.
Exactly.
So let me now go to this. So now, who are the people that can then submit their projects and follow all those processes, the plans, the costs, and getting your professional team to package all of these things? It's either that it's a fully or conditionally accredited social housing institution can submit. Now, this is relating to that question that you asked. I'm not a social housing institution, but I'm an other delivery agent, right? Now, there are certain things that that delivery agent must submit. So, for example, if you're a contractor with the CIDB grading or whatever, you're a contractor and you want to develop this piece of land. These are the things that you would need to submit, right? Is your founding documents, your CIPC registration, director's registration, the company structure, ownership, board governance, the business plan, all of these documents, the letters of appointments of CVs, the contracts of your staff, your triple BEE certificate, your transformation agenda. Somebody asked yesterday, what is the transformation agenda? So this is important. The operation policies, procedures, tenant and property management. Now, what tends to happen sometimes, and you can do it two ways. You can either develop this thing fully and then decide, you know what, ultimately, I'm going to manage these properties. That means you're going to submit your operational policies, procedures, your tenant management and property management policies. And because you're an existing company, you will need to submit your audited financial statements and your going concern status. So it means you must be a going concern. Now, I just wanted to explain this, that what sometimes happens, and it's where I was working, this sometimes happened, is that you'd get a private developer, they would liaise with the municipality because they got a piece of land and the municipality then buys the land from them. And they say to the municipality, okay, on this piece of land, I'm going to build social housing units for you. I'm going to build RDP units for you. And I'm going to build some FLISP units. And what FLISP is another government program, which is ownership units. It means that government subsidizes the price to buy the property and you can own it, right? In terms of the bond costs. So they go, the private developers, and they say, okay, this is our land. We buying you must buy this land at whatever price, but we are gonna build these units for you. Then what these developers sometimes do, they will link with a social housing institution and say, okay, we're building this social housing units, or the municipalities may recommend an institution that can do these units. We're gonna build this, but you are gonna manage those properties. So what tends to happen is that at the beginning stage of the construction and the development, that SHI is brought on board. So you part of the construction, the specification, what you require as a social housing institution. For example, you want a guardhouse, you want an office, you want a community hall, you want, depending on what your organization specs are, you must ensure that those things are put in place. The development agent, your private developer, submits that project with the SHI's information in terms of tenant management, property management, and so forth. Do you see? To the SHRA for that specific project. So when the development is now finished, the SHI then takes over, tenants the units, gets the tenants and manages those units. So that's a different way. Or there's the other way where the SHI itself will get the land, will get the building, will appoint its professional team, package the project, submit it directly to the SHRA, tender for a contractor to develop those units. Do you see the difference? Is that the private developer will develop the units and can hand it over to a SHI. So they'll do the construction and everything of those units. Hand it over to the SHI, or they sometimes manage those units. But if you're the private developer, you're not going the route of getting a social housing institution accredited, and you want to get a project accredited, you must ensure that you submit this information to the SHRA as an ODA. A social housing institution has already undertaken their process. They've already got their accreditation. Now all they're doing is getting the project accredited. Are you guys with me? So when it's quiet, I'm assuming everybody understands the difference. So now this
Sorry.
Oh, is there a question?
Yeah, thanks, ma'am,
Okay.
for the presentation and the clear explanation of the difference between an SHI and an ODA.
Okay.
What I want to find out though is, can an ODA decide, perhaps because they've got capacity, to build a capacity for property management within themselves without outsourcing it to an SHI?
Yes, you can do that, but it means what you then would then need to do is you would then need to have your, you see these things, your tenant management and property management policies, you know, those policies that are relevant to property management. You're going to need to have to put those in place and submit those as well. So you are able to do that as an ODA. Okay. Right, so let me move on now to the next one. And I think just so that people get clarity, and I should have done this yesterday, is really when I'm emphasizing rental units, just so that when you go to your communities and you start looking at projects, that your communication is very, very clear. That there are different types of government programs, and that you don't want a situation where people go into your rental program and they say, oh, we can't rent forever. It's government we need to own. You know, government funded this, so I must get ownership after 4 years, 5 years. It's very important that you understand this, and so that you are able to communicate this, is that social housing is purely rental, high to medium density stock. That's a given, it's done. It's purely rental. Then you have your other types of products that government offers. For example, we all talk about the RDP, which is your ownership. Some of it will be single standing houses and stuff. That's for ownership for people below 3.5 and whatever. There's criteria for that. You own it, it belongs to you. So that's normally for lower income. But the other one that's important to know is this program that they call FLISP, which is really ownership, but you pay a certain portion and government subsidizes a certain portion of that bond so that you can own property. The income group for that, I think, is up until about 25,000 Rand, if I'm not mistaken. So it means even you can look at those various options. You can do a mixture of social housing units if your target market demands that ownership, and I want to do social housing. There's a rental market and you got an ownership market. Some ODAs, let's say ODAs, actually build the two types of products. So they have a mixed product, but the FLISP projects are not built through the restructuring grant, through SHRA. It's only the social housing units that you'll get money for. So it means these other units, you'll either get money through a bank because you are able to raise the capital to build these units, and you sell off these units, but the government assists the beneficiary, the person who wants to buy them. I think it's up until about 300,000 Rand for the price of the unit. So out of that 300,000 Rand, there's a percentage, maybe the state gives 90,000 Rand, you have to raise the bond. So there's this myth where it's always said that government does not look at that market that wants to own. It's important to know that there is that program where people can own, so that you do not confuse your rental, which is purely social housing and stays rental, and this one. So even if you have people that come in at rental because that's where they are in their lives, we've spoken about our tenant management, communication, education. When people are moving up the ladder, they've been in your project, it's important for you to understand these other programs. So you begin to say to people, but you know, even in your training, there are these other government opportunities and other programs that you can move to for ownership. So it's important that you also look, when you liaise and with your province, is get the picture of the type of products that are being available. They'll also know where FLISP housing is going to be, or where there are opportunities for a mixture. So I just wanted to clarify that to people so that your focus for social housing remains on rental stock. There must be no confusion around ownership. It is purely rental units.
Cheryl,
So let me just...
maybe to also assist the colleagues as well. So in terms of the FLISP, Cheryl is right. This is not within the SHRA's mandate to regulate or even to fund. So this is just for information that there is this program in government called FLISP. The program, though, is still one of the Human Settlements, Department of Human Settlements program. In fact, it is a program managed through what some of you will know as NHFC, National Housing Finance Corporation. So if you want more information relating to, say, for example, as Sharon is suggesting, that you may want to say in this piece of land or land parcel, it will be ideal that I put up both a mix of social housing and FLISP. So it means that then in your interfacing, you need to interface with SHRA for the social housing piece, and with NHFC for the FLISP thing. But yeah, NHFC would be able to give you more information in terms of the FLISP. And I just also want to emphasize that social housing really should be seen as a step in the whole human settlements ladder. So people should not be taken, and this is where the program or the sector has always had problems, where you find people who come in and over a period, there's a claim that they cannot be paying rent for in perpetuity or forever. It's because such people have not been informed of other programs that are available where they can be moved for ownership, such as FLISP, where they get a subsidy to add up to the bond that the bank would finance them with. So it's this information that as a developer or as an SHI, you know, that information has to go out to your beneficiaries to say, we are giving you, or we are allowing you to occupy a social housing unit, but bear in mind that over a period, and as your income level improves, there's an opportunity for you to own. And here's a program called FLISP, which you can engage with as well.
Yeah, I think this is important. And when I'll just give you an example. You know, sometimes you can be in a specific area and you will get somebody who's a pensioner and maybe their pension is not state pension, they were working somewhere and they now earn a pension of about 3,000 Rand a month. Now there's no RDP products, say in that particular area or that province that are being developed. What you'll find is those people will come and apply for your social housing units. So it's important over time, because they will also be the ones that say, I mean, I'm retired, I can't rent forever, is that they need to be kept abreast of opportunities that, look, you're coming in here now because you want to get out of those conditions that you're living in. But we have to be on the lookout for when your art type of product comes on board so that you can make an application to move and go there. So we know for a fact that there's always this desperation. When the social housing products come in, everybody goes for it. But ultimately, my objective is not to rent. My objective is just to find a place now, but I want to own. So it's important that education, I will overemphasize, is for your tenants, your community, and people to know. This is rental, and like John saying, it's a stepping stone. If you come in because you're desperate and you're somebody that could qualify for RDP, is fine, come in, but ensure that you make your application so you can move out to your own free ownership accommodation. So let me just give this breakdown, and I'm going to give you some examples in terms of the project funding model, how SHRA will fund your development. But in the training, again, that John and Emma are going to do after this, is that you're going to get more information and actually get practical examples. So that training will be focused really on your project packaging and your modeling. So I'm just giving you an overview so you understand. Now, the total amount of money that you will get per unit from the SHRA is 270, let's just round it off, it's actually 271,867 per unit. Now this includes the restructuring grant and your provincial subsidy. Let me just explain this a bit. In the past, was that province used to administer in what they called institutional subsidy. And the SHRA used to administer the restructuring grant. So as a social housing institution, you had to make an application for funding at the SHRA, and you had to go to your province to make an application for your institutional subsidy. So that became too much of a headache for SHIs, because one would be approved and the other one would be taking long, maybe in province, to get approved, and it therefore delays for people to start construction. So what has happened now is that province has now given over that institutional subsidy, that budget for institutional subsidy, then comes to the SHRA. So you're only making one application at the SHRA. So therefore that 271,867 is inclusive of the SHRA's portion as well as the provincial portion. So you don't need to now go and do applications at two different places. So that's the amount you get per unit. The SHRA does have a benchmark for the cost per unit. Remember that you're going to have construction. I don't know why my screen is turning green. You'll have construction costs. So the average construction cost for a social housing unit, including land and your bulk services, is about 400,000 per unit. It's not saying, it's just giving you an average. It's not saying that people can't do it at 350 per unit and or lower than this. It's just kind of an average to say with land, the price of the land, the price of putting park services and your construction, your unit should be costing about 400,000. Now, you must look also at these units and your beneficiaries for this particular project must be your qualifying incomes of 1.5 to 15,000. Yesterday, I spoke about these different target markets when I spoke about the program and who the target market is. So I'm just refreshing again. You have to show that 30% of this project is going to people in that income group that they call primary beneficiaries. That's between 1.5 and 5,500, and 70% of your project, of your units, are going to go to people between 5,501 to 15,000. So what this means is that people who are earning 17,000, 15,500 will not qualify for this program. So therefore it has a maximum income group up to 15,000. Now people always say, okay, can we stick with 30, 70? 30 is a minimum for the primary market. You cannot go lower than that. But if you are able to develop your units cheaper at a lesser price per unit, it means that, and there's a demand for this primary market, you are allowed to increase your primary market. So you can say, I'll do 40% here and 60% here. This is just a minimum that you cannot go below 30%. So whatever you are building, you must ensure that you are building those units, and 30% of those units are going to go to those people. But now I know people will say, okay, these units, what are they going to look like? And these units for the higher income group, what are they going to look like? In social housing, there's this thing where we say, because the objective of the project is to have mixed income groups, it does not mean that the standard and the quality for that income group, because they're going to pay cheaper rents, must be of a substandard. What normally happens is that everything in all the units will look the same. And generally what people do, ODAs and SHIs do, for the people that are going to pay higher rental, they will just change the spec. Maybe they will add cupboards in these units, or they will add, like maybe kitchen cupboards, or they will add bedroom cupboards, or they will change the countertops in the kitchen. So it's just about changing the spec. So you're not going to find that units, the units for these, the primary beneficiaries, will look like something with no roofs, no tiles, and it's pure concrete. That is a no-no. So you still have to give a nice living standard, a unit of good quality to them, but you play around with the specifications and the finishes, I'll call it the finishes, for that income group, so that you are able to then charge the greater rent. So when you do this and the viability of your project, you then have to determine and say, okay, these are my rentals for, out of my 100 units, it means that 30 of my units are going to go to that group, 70 are going to go to this group. This is the rentals I'll charge, but I'll also show you how you can split amongst income groups. Why you do that is to ensure that that rent that you are going to collect for those 100 units will cover the expenses. So what is the expenses are going to entail? The expenses are going to entail things like your the salary for your caretaker, your maintenance, your cleaning, your security, your gardening, maybe the repayment of a loan, whatever office expenses you have there is covered by the rental income. And that you are able to have a surplus to put away. So your project will only be approved by the SHRA if you can show that it is viable. We say a project is viable when your rental income can cover your operating costs, your expenses. But I'm not going to go into detail. I'm sure the other trainings will go into much detail. But I'm just trying to give you some idea of what will make your project be approved ultimately to get the funding. Okay, so even though, for example, I spoke about the 30%, you decide I'm going to have 40% and 60% here, and my project is still viable. It doesn't mean that the amount of money that you're going to get per unit is going to increase. It will still remain that 271,867. Now, I'm sure you must be looking, oh, the cost of the unit is 400,000. I'm getting this grant money from the SHRA of 271,867. Where am I going to get the difference from? So I'm going to show you now in my next slide. So now this is what you will have to submit to the SHRA. And I've given an example. Is that in terms of social housing institutions, right? So listen to this one carefully. You must show that you are able to raise 30%, right, of your funding. So that's the difference between the amount you get from SHRA and that 400,000, for example. So you must be able to show you have 30%. It means your grant funding that you get from the SHRA, like you can see on that graph of mine, 70% of your construction costs will come from the SHRA as grant funding. You, as a social housing institution, must raise 30% of that money. So you'll just see in this example that I've put here, if we're saying the average cost of a unit is 400,000. And what does this mean? It means that per unit, you're going to get that 276,867. So you must be able to raise 123,000, which is the 30% for the cost per unit. Now, if you take, for example, 100 units at 400,000 per unit, it means your cost is about 40 million, right? Inclusive of land, bulk, whatever. This is going to be the construction cost for this project. It's 40 million. This is an example, guys. Maybe yours is 35 million, whatever. I'm just giving you this example. It's 40 million. It means that the SHRA will give you 70%. You will get 27,686,700, right? Which is that 100 per 267 per unit. Okay. You'll get 27 million, 27.6 million of that 40 million. You then have to raise funding of 12 million. Okay, so where do you go for this funding? Yesterday, we were talking about your key stakeholders, and one of them was your financiers, which is your NHFC Development Bank, your commercial banks, and so forth. Those are the people that you go to raise this 30% debt funding. Now, normally, what I know what the SHRA has done is that, and government on the national level, is that they have been negotiating, for example, with commercial banks, so that this 30% funding that SHIs or not ODAs at this stage, SHIs need to get has a lower interest rate. Normally, if you go to NHFC, those, because it's a government funded, I say banking in inverts, financing institution, is that the rates will be much higher, the interest rate. So this is only for SHIs. The model for SHIs is that you get 70% and you must raise 30%. So I've put it in monetary value so people can understand it better. What will be the difference that you must get and how you calculate the cost per unit and the grant per unit and how much will be the debt funding per unit. So now let's go to the next one, which is your ODA. Now, Martha, like she was saying, okay, I'm going to be an ODA, I'm going to build units and so forth. The requirements for an ODA is very different because from government and SHRA's perspective is that an ODA should be a going concern, an institution that has financial backing, an institution that has a track record. So if I'm a big, huge construction company and I want to be an ODA and I want to get projects funded and accredited, I must be able to show the following, that I have 20% equity. And what does equity mean? It means I can bring 20% of my own money into that development cost, right? And 10% is debt funding, means I can go to my bank and get 10% of my construction cost. But the cost per unit or the grant will still be 70% from the SHRA. So you see the difference between an SHI's model and a model for the ODA. And SHI, you don't need to bring in money. You don't need to do equity because it's not a requirement. That's why a startup institution that has no money, no finances, as long as you have your systems in place and proper governance structures, policies, whatever, you can get your 70% and NHFC can give you the 30% funding. But an ODA, you must be able to show that you are putting 20% of your money into this development. Now, the money can be in the form of land. You'll find some of these ODAs take their land and they put it as the 20% equity into the project. Okay, so now if you look at how the funding will work in terms of, if you take the same example, your construction cost is 40 million, right? The SHRA will give you the same that they were going to give the SHI, which is 100 times that cost per unit. So you'll still get 27.6 million. But you must bring in 8 million of your own money. That's the 20% equity. And then you must go and raise debt or loans of 10%. Sometimes SHIs can, I mean, maybe ODAs even want to put in the 30% or whatever and don't want to do debt funding, but this is normally the model, is that you must put in 20% and 10%. So this is to show you the difference, is that the private sector as an ODA has a different funding model than an SHI. And to give you an indication on how much money you will get as grant funding for a specific project. So you could increase this to 200 units, 1,000 units, it will be 1,000 times that 276,867 per unit. You see, I used 100 so that you can just see the values. Do people have any questions around these two funding models? Are we all fine?
Just one question, Sharon. You might have said it, I might have missed it, and in that case, my apologies. Does this, so on an SHI, you must be able to raise a debt of 30% of the total amount of whatever you want. And on an ADA, 20%, or you can, if you have money, you can then do that 30%, but you're allowed to then have debt. Does this then, is it after accreditation on projects and the institution, or this happens after accreditation? I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why I'm asking.
Yeah. Okay.
Because if it comes after, don't you then are gonna have a problem of projects being approved and an SHI or ODA being approved, but they are now battling with raising the debt so that projects can kickstart.
Okay.
Yeah,
I think, yeah, John raised this, I think, yesterday and said, there's a lot of social housing institutions. Let's talk institutions, not ODAs. They've accredited, and maybe they've received that conditional accreditation. They now at the packaging and whatever, and they can't get what they call project closure. Né? Means the project is approved, it has met all these things, it's at that stage now, where you've got the land, you've got your building plans, you have estimates, all those things that I spoke about in my previous thing. But you have the SHRA 70%. Now the project can't move because you can't get financial closure. That means that 30% debt financing. So that has been a struggle for SHIs, but the SHRA has been working extensively, and government as a whole, with your development banks, your commercial banks, and the NHFC to ensure that that 30%, the 30% is raised and institutions can access that. But again, it's like any person that is going for a loan. You have to show, and because social housing, you're not going to have, if you just start as an institution, you don't have millions of money in the bank. You get what I mean? But because it's a government program, the thing that you have to show is that you have the structures in place within your institution. You are able to show them financial forecasts. That is why when we were talking about this yesterday, your requirements is to have a business that makes sense, and you have applied your mind where your target mark, you've put a lot of work into it. You have a financial forecast in terms of 3, 5, 10 years. This is where I'm taking this institution. This is my first 100 units. This is the financial forecast. Your governance structures are in place. You have policies, procedures, because that is what they are going to evaluate you on, not on how much money you are bringing in. Do you understand? So it's important that those things are in place. And if those things are in place, people normally get that 30% funding specifically from the NHFC. So it's important that how you manage and the things and your systems and your structures are in place. And you must be able to show, this is the income I'm going to get from my rent, right? You got to make that projection. These are my expenses. The repayment of my debt is going to be X amount every month over this period of 10 years. At the same time, I am growing my portfolio of stock from 100 to 2,000 units in 10 years' time. And you need to then project and show how you are going to pay this loan off. Do you understand? So it is that information that makes people qualify. I hope that I'm answering your question when you spoke about, is it after accreditation? Now, that is an SHI, right? Because as an SHI, you cannot go for this funding unless you've been accredited. Now, in ODA, you cannot go for this funding unless that project is approved and you've submitted some of those documents. So you are now submitting your project, and it's at the stage where it's reached a certain stage. You are submitting the funding model, where you're going to get your money from. You're going to show as an ODA, I have 5 million or 4.3 million that I'm putting in as equity. Nedbank, you've got confirmation of your loan of 4.3 from Nedbank, and then the SHRA funds your project of that 70%. Have I answered you adequately?
Yeah, you have. Although I still have some concerns, particularly on the SHI.
On the
Unless if it's a rule of the thumb that once you get accredited, NHFC will give you the money, and the interest rates are applicable. Once they are factored in, they will not have a detrimental effect on the feasibility or on the viability of the project. Because if then NHFC is unable to fund the NSHIs, it means that they will have to go and look for money elsewhere, and that money might just be expensive. The interest rate might be higher, and that might affect the viability of the project.
Precisely. I think what you are saying is valid, and when John gives the numbers of the people at the end of the session, we know for a fact, like I just saw the other day, the types of agreements. For example, I know, that's why I mentioned Nedbank. I know that Nedbank has been brought on board for social housing. So I'm saying on a national level, there's also that negotiation with commercial lenders so that they are able to fund SHIs, this portion of the 30%. But maybe John can come in more. I, at this stage, cannot say how many SHIs are struggling. Because, like, for example, where I come from, it was a municipal owned entity, right? So there was no debt funding. The municipality gave that 30%. Do you see? So there were no loans where you had to go. So you find that their projects kick off much quicker than a private SHI, because the municipality is able to take that 30% as part of their capital funding. You don't go out for loans. But a private SHI does have that challenge. And maybe John can, just of his experience of other SHIs, most of them that I know, existing ones, do get that 30% to get financial closure. I'm not sure about the up and comings. Maybe John can give input on that.
Well, I don't have, thanks, Cheryl. I don't have the stats with me, but I do know that indeed the issue of the project that has been approved for the CCG or the capital grant sometimes gets stuck. And this is where Cheryl refers to a term, financial closure, getting that financial closure. I know, though, in trying to mitigate that, as part of the application that you then lodge in as an SHI or as an ODA with a SHRA to say, here's the project, there's a requirement for you to enclose in there a letter, and I can't remember what they call that letter, but it's almost like a letter of intent that comes from your financier or future or prospective financier who says, I have looked at the application or the proposed project, and I'm willing to give or avail this debt funding, whatever the figure is. But at that time, it's not a definite signed on the dotted line commitment. I think it's a principle a letter that just says, I've looked at the project as a financier for debt funding, and I am willing to think. So thus far, I know that one of the mitigating steps have been taken, such that when the CCG decision is made, at least there is that in principle letter, so that when John walks out from the SHRA with the CCG or the grant for the capital grant, he then knows that from here I'm going to Nedbank, who has in principle given me a nod. And sometimes things would have changed or moved, and that's where the difficulty comes in, and that's where the financial closure comes in.
Okay, I hope that helps a bit with your question. But we are saying yes, that challenge does exist. But if you have your ducks in a row, like I was saying, most of the time, if your things are in order, it's very rare that you get refused. And like John is saying, produce that. That is when they evaluate your project, they look at the financial viability, and they give you that letter, and the SHRA then approves and gives you that confirmation of your grant. You take it to the bank or whatever, it makes it easier for them to then confirm that 30%. So it's about really being meticulous here, I think.
Yeah, let me also just perhaps look. All the details will come more in the next week's session when we look at project packaging in full. Yeah. But perhaps also to indicate that not only is the sector relying on NHFC, because NHFC in its own right also have a very limited pot of money, so they will not be financing from that point of view all the social housing projects. So NEF, in fact, this past Sunday, we were in Kempton Park. Those of you who know Kempton Park, we were launching with the minister and the chair of council and the mayor, Zwandile, on Sunday, a 312 unit project in the CBD of Kempton Park. And that project, developed by an ODA, was partly funded from a debt funding point of view by NEF, National, I think called National Empowerment Fund. So National Empowerment Fund, or NEF, does fund social housing. There are talks with the PIC. What does PIC stand for? Public.
Public
the one that
Commission.
Yes. So there are talks between the SHRA currently with the PIC to consider debt funding for social housing projects. NHFC, of course, is a usual suspect. Cheryl has made reference.
Development Bank, Nedbank, Development Bank yes. As well, I think.
Yeah, the South African Development Bank. Cheryl has made mention of Nedbank. They have funded a number of social housing projects. There is this one, I think it's called Home Loan SA or something like that. That also is one. So those are just a few that I'm top of my mind. I know have been funding the thing. In fact, 2 months ago, we had an investment webinar or seminar with, I think it was about 300 people who were present there. And the DG of Human Settlement, Mr. Changana, made a proposal on the table, which I'm assuming that the high office bearers here, the SHRA, are actioning that NHBRC in its own right sits as part of the entity of Human Settlement, sits with a pot of money. I think it's called a guarantee fund, something like that. And DG was basically saying that this is one of the things that Shira needs to engage with its sister company, in this case, NHBRC, to say how can NHBRC use that to leverage and assist to unlock some of this debt funding with the private sector. Colleagues, this is one program, again, I must emphasize that of government that seeks to leverage on private sector investment. So as per model that Cheryl has just taken us through, we can see that social housing is that program of government that is leveraging the private sector investment in development. And I mean, I don't think I speak out of tune when I say that it is one of those programs that will, in the next coming years going forward, be receiving much more focus from the human settlement point of view as well.
And I also, I don't know if people saw this, the way the minister was talking about actually having a human settlement bank. So I'm assuming if such a bank ever is established, this is part of where perhaps SHIs can begin to access debt funding for social housing programs. But I think that will be in the long term. But at least there's that thought process in terms of how do we begin to have making access to debt and funding easier. Okay, I have this, your internet.
Sorry, it is Albert. Can I just ask a question, please?
Yes, you may.
It relates to the ODAs, where we say, if we look at the slide, that they must have 20% equity. What I want to know, if you look at the equity, must that come from themselves, or can it also then be borrowed? Thank you.
The equity must come from themselves, because that's what equity means. And the 10% is borrowed money. And I think why they're doing this, because it's saying really, the fact that I'm giving an ODA, it means it's somebody that's coming in with the financial capacity. And most ODAs come in with 20% as land. Those are the ones that I'm aware of. A lot of them have pieces of land and they put the land as equity. But it's definitely 20% equity, meaning that you must show that you have the financial resources. That's why they ask for your audited financials and to show that you're a going concern, that you're putting in of your own money. Because if I was going to do 30% loan, then why would I give it to you and not an SHI? You get what I'm saying? Because your model will then become identical to the SHI if you're going to go and loan 30%. John?
Having said so, though, and I think in detail, all this will be spoken more of in the next week's session. There are applications where the applicant, which is an ODA, brings in what we call an equity partner, who would be ordinarily another financier who says, I'm interested to come in as an equity provider or partner in this proposed project. Yeah, I think in the end, whichever route you take, the primary thing that this thing has to tick off is that the project application must be viable financially. So let me just ask that there's something like this be parked and can be discussed in detail as well in our next week's session, where you could look at what does equity partner mean and what the implications are, and what is it that you need to be mindful of as an ODA coming into such an arrangement.
Because the other thing that I've seen as an equity partner, if you say it's an equity partner coming on board, Now, ODA makes money out of the construction, isn't it? Because they are normally the ones that will be the developers. So they make their money out of construction. So I would assume that there is some agreement between the ODA and the equity partner that you have a certain portion of whatever profits there are. Do you get what I'm saying? So that is another way that could be handled. But like John is saying, I think this can be discussed in more detail in your other training session.
There are two
Okay.
hands I can see, Puti and Marius, in that order.
Yes, thanks, John. I just wanted to just get a clarification on the CCG because on the slides, on slide 65, it says it's 271867, but in the example, it's 276867. So I don't know whether it's just a mistake or whether there's something that...
Yeah. No, my apologies. I'll just double check which is the right one.
Okay.
But I think in that training, you'll get the exact figure. I think for my purposes, I was just averaging out, but to get you to see how it actually works. I'll double check which one it is.
Yeah, because in the manual
271.
itself.
Okay.
Okay. Because in the manual
It's
itself as well, it's got the same figures, the 271 and the 276.
Okay.
Okay, no, but
All
if
right, I'll just...
271, then...
Okay, I'll fix that up. Thanks for that observation. I didn't even notice. Okay, but at least you get the picture of what this entails.
Yes, no, thank
All
you.
right, so I just want to show you, is everybody else happy that we move on?
No, there was a hand again, Cheryl, from Marius. Marius, if you can come in.
Okay, Marius.
John, thanks. I had the same question, so it's been answered. Thanks very much.
Okay. All right. If I take you to the next slide. Remember, I was talking about your income bands. Now, if you look at 1 and 2 on this particular slide, that 10% and 20% makes up your primary market, and 3, 4, and 5 makes up your secondary market. So it is just to give you an idea, when you are doing your development, how you can spread your units into different income groups to make your project viable. Some people will maybe choose number 2. There's some projects I know where they do 30% in number 2. Do you get what I'm saying? On that number 2 income band, you are still meeting the criteria of 30% to your primary market. And there's some people maybe that would start at use 4 and 5 as their secondary market as 70%. Do you see? So it all depends on what is the viability for your project. Does it mean that I must pitch my rentals or give my units for 4 and 5 as my secondary market and then use number 2 as my primary market of 30%? But if your project, specifically for projects that have huge numbers of units, I've seen projects with 2,000 units, you will find that they are able to do an income spread like this and make the project viable just because of the number of units that they have. So they can therefore have accommodate income groups between 1.5 and 3.5 with the lower rental, say, of about 600 Rand. And then this income group, maybe the rentals about 1,000 odd. That income group, you find rentals between number 3, you find rentals around 1.6. The next one, maybe it's around 2,000 odd. And then number 5 could be around up until about 3,000 odd Rand. So you can have this spread of income groups, but the most important thing is that ultimately these rentals and your income groups are able to show that this project is going to be viable, means that the rental income is able to cover operating costs and pay off your debt. So this is just an example of the income spread. And the SHRA has actually given this a baseline. But like I'm saying to you, what you must take note of, it does not mean that I have to start all at 5,500. If I have lesser units, I can then do my 70% and say, okay, let me start from this income group so that I have more income to cover operational costs. So this is just a guideline for you to have a look at. Okay, people have questions around that. But I'm sure in the project packaging, you get more examples on how you can play around with these income groups and how you can pitch your rentals. And normally with the pitching, I don't want to go into too much detail, but normally when you're pitching the rental and you say, if I have to take somebody that's earning 3,000 Rand, normally, and my policy says my rent mustn't be more than 30% of that 3,000 Rand, then you know more or less what that rent will be for that income bracket. Do you see? Okay, happy. I'll just move. This is a new section around compliance and monitoring. You're an accredited institution. It's just so that people understand you have projects, you're an SHI, you've built, you're managing, but there is compliance that needs to be adhered to. So some of this compliance is that on an annual basis, you must submit your audited annual financial statements to the SHRA because now you're a going concern. Your tax certificates must be in good standing, and your annual approved business plan. So although when you submitted for accreditation, you submitted a business plan, but you've got to submit your annual business plan and operational plan on an annual basis. The SHRA does review this, and they can reject your business plan. For example, if you're going completely off track in terms of your business plan, or it doesn't make sense, they can send that business plan back and say, no, we're not happy with your business plan and the projections or whatever that you are making, and ask you to submit an acceptable business plan, or your business plan is of such poor quality that it doesn't say anything to them. So this is part of the compliance. The other compliance, which is done normally on a quarterly basis. There's a monitoring tool that the SHRA will send to institutions. And this is like kind of the SHRA benchmark framework. So there's key analysis is done, the overview of the reporting of the institution, your rent collection, your rent increases, your debtors, your vacancy rates, turnover, total operating costs, and so forth and so forth. So what this is really a spreadsheet that you will populate, and it will say how much was your rental income, how much was your expenses, what is your, how many units do you have vacant, how many tenants are in arrears, what is the value of that arrears, how many days has it been, in how many days is that arrears, 90, 60 or whatever. So you would have to populate all of this on a spreadsheet. It would also look at things like what is the rentals that you're charging for various income groups you have to populate, and it's done on one spreadsheet for whatever how many projects. It gives you an analysis per project, and it gives you an overview analysis across all your projects. Now, just to give you an example, on a quarterly basis, you will get this thing back and you'll either have red or green or yellow against certain of those benchmarks. For example, these would be the standard benchmarks that the SHRA has. It says rental collection 95% and greater than 95% is the benchmark. If you are collecting rent at 70% because you have vacant units or tenants are not paying you, your report is going to come back as red. It means that you have to put a plan of action in place to turn that around to meet that benchmark. It also looks at your annual rental increases, and it uses CPI as a benchmark. So for example, if CPI is 5.5%, and then you as an institution, because you have not managed your finances properly, decide, no, I'm going to increase everybody's rent by 20%. That is going to be non-compliance. It will immediately kick out as red, including your debtors and arrears. And I spoke about vacancy rates, that if you have a high vacancy rate, you have a loss of income. So if you have a vacancy rate of less than 2%, it's acceptable. You'll get a green for that because people do move out. You've got to fix that unit up. But if you are not tenanting your unit fast enough and they are remaining vacant for 6 months, it means you lose income for 6 months. So when you do your budgeting and so forth, you make provision for vacancy rate. You say, this is my income. On your expense side, you said, this is my provision for vacancies. On your income, this is provision for vacancies, so that you can make a proper projection of what your rent is going to be. But that is all in your financing model that you do. Also, turnover rate, the SHRA looks at. So if you have a high turnover rate, it means there's a problem in your unit, in your project. Either that people are extremely unhappy and they're moving all the time. They monitor those turnover rates. And like I say, you get green, or if you're in between, or if you get green, you find you are meeting those benchmarks. If you get an amber color, it means you got to be careful. This thing can go out of hand. You must bring it back to green. But if you got red, then the SHRA wants answers from you in terms of how are you going to turn these things around. Your total operating costs, including outsourcing costs, is about 1,350 per unit. If you're below that, it's either meaning that you are not maintaining your units, or you are paying too much for certain things. If your total operating cost is 5,000 per unit, it means it is problematic. But that is just a benchmark that they look at to say, okay, my operating costs are 1,300, so I'm on track in terms of how I'm managing my costs. There's also financial ratios, and this is very technical, that they look at, which means, is your institution a going concern? Is your liabilities exceeding your assets that you have? Because it's problematic if your debt and what you owe is more than your assets. So those things are also measured. And I've just given a summary for explanation. What does current ratio mean, right? It means your ability to pay off your short-term liability with the assets that you have. Your current assets will be things about the money in the bank account and so forth. So it looks at, are you able, for example, to pay off certain things? What could be short-term liabilities, like your short-term accounts that you may have as an institution? Are you able to pay them because you have money in the bank? Your debt service ratio, which means it's your cash flow to pay your current debt. Now, we just spoke about that 30% loan that you will take. do you have the resources to pay off your debt? That is also measured in terms of the financial information that you will populate on a quarterly basis. Your direct cost to income ratio is the cost of running your institution in relation to your operating income. So if your income is 20,000 Rand a month and you are spending 30,000 Rand a month, that is going to show up as a red because your operating income is not in aligned with your expenses, right? In terms of the cost and what you're spending. So it means that you are going to be at a deficit. So those are important benchmarks that the SHRA will look at to see whether this institution will be going concern. So this is part of the SHRA's compliance and monitoring. You're going to have to do that as an institution. Every quarter you will have to submit this compliance tool. They come back to you. They highlight things that are where you're missing the mark. You've got to tell them how you're going to fix those things up. And I know, like John, and then sometimes there are institutions that struggle because of things that are outside of their. It could be that in a particular ward or community where your project is, there's been just all of a sudden community mobilization and unrest, and somebody out of the blue decides, no, in this area, we're all not going to pay rent anymore because that landlord did this, and you are impacted on it. So the SHRA does sometimes come in to help institutions if things have been so bad because of somewhat other external factors. And John will speak a bit about the type of grants that are available to help institutions to turn around areas where there are challenges. I'm going to move quite fast now. So also in terms of compliance, whatever documentation that you've submitted to the SHRA, be it your lease agreement or those institutional documents, your business plan that's been approved, you can't just make material changes with them without informing the SHRA and getting the relevant permission. So that you write to them and you say, these are the changes and they're okay and happy with it. So you can't just do that. The SHRA on a regular basis will do inspections. So I spoke about this yesterday. They'll sometimes do building condition inspections to ensure that your stock is maintained and the value of that stock is maintained. So they'll come get a consultant, they'll just randomly pick institutions and do a number of their buildings. But like I'm saying, the good thing is here, you would get a report, and that report is going to say, these are the things that you must do. You must immediately start fixing this in 2 years. So you almost get a plan of action. They also undertake tenancy audits to ensure that the people that you've put in your unit are the people that qualify to be in your units. Now, I know that can sometimes be controversial because somebody could be in your unit for 5 years and their incomes have changed and maybe even become 15,100. It doesn't mean that you didn't comply because the SHRA will then look at when the person came in, what was their income. But it also gives an indication of how many people are now starting to move over that maximum income group. Does it mean that 15,000 needs to be moved higher, or does it mean that people need to start moving out of your project? Okay, and any things like the SHRA can undertake to do seizures of any documentation or photocopy of any of your documents if it's required for any type of investigations. And this is in the Act, in the section on the Act, that they can do that, because if they find that there's certain things that were misappropriated or there was some fraud or whatever, they are allowed in terms of the law to seize documents and seize information. Although sometimes, I mean, I've never known of an institution where this has happened. So they can also undertake forensic investigations and audits. If you are providing false audit reports, your audited financials are falsified and all of those things, they can do this. And they're allowed to do this in terms of the act, because you must remember that it's state money that was put into the building and the construction of those units. Again, here, there can be a review process. If, for example, you are not happy at some of the decisions, there is a review process. It means you can put in writing to say you're not happy about this decision, either the withdrawal of your accreditation or whatever that the SHRA is not happy with. Maybe the report, compliance report, they say, no, you're not meeting this and you're not happy. There is a review process that you will put in writing to say that this is what I'm not happy with. I'm going to move a bit faster now because I want to give John some time. Now, for example, if me as an institution, I want to cease being, I don't want to be a social housing institution anymore. I have to apply in writing for that stock to be transferred either to another social housing institution. I just can't go off and say, oh, now I'm going to sell the stock off. I have to go through the SHRA. They will either look at the value of the stock and decide to sell it, but it will be not the institution's decision. Or they can say, okay, in consultation with this institution, we'll take the stock and we'll transfer it to another institution. If you have put equity in, mean you have put in your own money, whether be it land or be it whatever, into that project, there is a calculation that is done and the person does get the money back for whatever equity that they've put in themselves into the project. It's the same with disposing of your thing in the open market. This is what I'm talking about. Again, you cannot just do that. It has to get approval and it has to go through the SHRA. Like anything that's to do with good governance using public money, there's a code of conduct that sets out the standards of how we do business in the sector, that we are financially sustainable, good governance being important, and one of the most important is your service delivery, because now you need to deliver those services to your customers. They are now your customers because they're in your units. And like every other customer in South Africa, there are certain standards to customer services. So if you are saying, I'm going to fix a geyser, and I put that down as my standard, because the geyser is an emergency, I'm going to fix it within 24 hours. It means you must fix it within 24 hours. So you put in your standards, and it's about meeting those service delivery standards of excellence. The difference that I have seen from my experience, because sometimes they'll say, oh, social housing institutions are a government thing. No, social housing institutions perform at the standard of private sector. Because the service delivery in social housing institutions is totally different from what you get from your normal government institutions. And that is because the systems, the policies, and what you put in place meets private sector standards. In terms of what your product looks like, the way your products are maintained. So you have to ensure that that standard is maintained. So from time to time, the SHRA would also look at policies, procedures, and whatever that those policies and procedures, for example, do not discriminate. There's a certain code right? And the SRA will sometimes provide that advice. So that is just your normal standard code of conduct that you will find in organizations. Now, this is one that you must take note of, that of course there are challenges in the sector, and the factors that affect the pace and the scale of delivery of social housing units has to do with financing. And we spoke about this financing and getting financial closure. Your statutory approvals, for example, those approvals that you must get from your municipality can hold up projects so that they're not moving faster. You can get project blockages. It can be a project blockage in a community where the ward council is saying this project is not going to move until you have appointed 30% and here's the list, or we want 50% of the value of this work and there's strikes and whatever. So there is that, and we all know that that can happen in our communities and in our environment. The other one is your variations. So for example, if you do not do proper costing and have a proper team in place that does the costing of your development or construction costs, and you say, for example, oh, when you submitted your costs are 350,000 per unit, and when you start doing your construction or whatever, sorry, it's 400,000 per unit. When you start constructing, you find that your variations are now 500,000 per unit. So that is also one of the challenges, is how we are costing and how we are doing estimates in terms of our construction. The other challenge is the impact of evictions on social housing institutions. Because you almost operate like private sector, if somebody is not paying you rent and they have the means to pay and they're just delinquent, you have all the right in terms of the Rental Act to evict that person. But because sometimes there's this public outcry to evictions of people in social housing, it does sometimes become a challenge for institutions. But there are some interventions that have been done, and I'll show you in the next slide. I've said there can be, people can stop paying rent, my own experience, because they want ownership. They say, we're not paying rent anymore, we want ownership of these units. So they stop paying rent. Then you undertake eviction processes. You get things like illegal invasions. So you can be building units, and because there's a community out there where the Department of Human Settlement hasn't put up their RTP houses or whatever reason, and people invade your units, and then you've got to try and get them out. It's a long process. There's also those demands I said to stop evictions. The demands for community-based subcontracting, this is a given in South Africa and in our areas. When there's a construction project, there'll be a demand of community subcontracting. So the important thing is that you have to put when you are planning a project, you have to take those risks into consideration. What are you going to do to mitigate against those risks? You appoint your social facilitators that are going to be engaging with the community. You put your things and plans up front and in place, and those plans must be trustworthy. You must speak the truth. You must communicate clearly so people understand where you're coming from. I've seen people chopping and changing, and then they are not transparent, and then there's an uprising in a community. So the consultation with your community and your key stakeholders is very critical. Some of the intervention plans I've spoken about is social facilitation, which means you are communicating during construction, before you construct, during construction, you're still doing consumer education and communication with your tenants while they're in their unit. So it doesn't just start from that phase, it continues while that person is living in your unit. Consumer education, very important. Like I've overemphasized, the fact that social housing is rental has to be communicated very clearly, that this is not ownership. It can't be ambiguous. We cannot use wrong terminology like rent to buy, rent to own. No, it is purely rental. So those are the things that are very critical, and all your stakeholders need to be communicating the same message. You can't have your ward councillor talking about rent to buy because she heard something else, and you are talking about rental, because that gives mixed messages to communities. So honing in and getting the right message and getting your stakeholders to buy into your message and ensuring that they communicate your message is critical in terms of mitigating some of the challenges and the risks. Media engagement, going on the radio, the media, TV, talking about social housing and your project and whatever. Exhibitions, I know, like things like the Rand Show, the Shra, have been there, social housing institutions. And also this collaborative approach between the different products of human settlements. Remember, I was talking about your BNG, your RDPs, and your FLIS. The more we know about that and the more we can collaborate, we can then say to people that want to own, this is where you go. You don't come into my rental stock. This is the product that you need to go. I can just give an example. In one of the projects that we had this whole boycott where people said, we want ownership now, we've been renting forever. And people boycotted rent. And then we said, okay, because it was the time of uprising, what do you do? With provincial government, with the municipality, then said, okay, let's audit how many of these people want ownership. Some of them were not working. We then said, okay, how many RDP houses are coming up? We moved those that qualified to RDP. Those that want ownership, facilitated them into a FLIS program. So instead of just folding our arms and saying, we got a rent boycott, we're just going to evict, and that's it, would have made the situation worse. So you assess your situation and you ensure you bring in the role players that can address different aspects of your problems that you're having. And things like tenant support is very important. Somebody can lose their job. What do you have in place as an institution? Do you give the person 2 months or do you whatever? But this is all contained into your policy documents, how you handle somebody losing a job. What leeway do you give them? How do you bring in other programs, economic programs, like I'm saying, it can be your cleaning or your gardening service, where yours is for unemployed tenants so that they're able to pay your rent. So there's a lot of interventions that have been done to mitigate. The rest of my slides, I'm not going to go into in detail, but you get the presentation and it will just show you different products in different provinces. For example, this one in the Eastern Cape, right? It was a 113 million Rand project. One in the Free State, a 68 million Rand project, the number of units. This one is in Bloemfontein also. This one is an interesting one. This previously was a hostel owned by the municipality. And this hostel was a men's hostel, had lots of space on it, and the institution was able to convert that existing hostel into social housing units and build new units. It was no longer a hostel, it became a village. So what happened was You then had your hostel men who now moving to units. They were living in big dormitories, who now are able to bring their wives and their families to live with them. And that is why I'm saying this is one program that achieves government's objective of changing the landscape of our country and how people live. We know that hostels were single sex. Men alone were living in these conditions, working for the municipality, working for whoever, but their wives and whoever stayed ekaya in the homelands. And these families were separated for donkey's years. And now you're building a new community. They're now bringing their families in. The new unit, you are now integrating the surrounding community into that hostile environment. You're bringing all race groups, families, children. So it's a culture shock for those people, and it's about building community. So this is just an example of what I'm trying to show you when I say it is one program that can change the face of things. It can integrate things like what we call hostels, so that they become communities and those hostile mentalities and environments no longer exist. This is inner city, and this is our office block, inner city office block, and it was purchased and converted into social housing unit. And that was like out of an office block getting 210 social housing units. So one is able to do that with your municipalities. This is also another project of about 55. This one is in Pietermaritzburg in KZN, another KZN project. This is one in Limpopo, Mpumalanga, Northwest, Western Cape. So you can have a look at them. So there's a lot of these projects that are coming up and have been funded, and for over hundreds of millions of rands. I'm gonna end my section. So I will take questions and then I'll hand over to John, just to give you the closing and the relevant people that you can contact within the SHRA. So I'll do my last round of questions just to respond if somebody needs any clarity. Oh, and I must say thank you. Are there any questions that people have or points of clarity that you need? John, nobody's raising hands or...
There was a question which that came on the chat line. Lolo Pizzo asks a question, and I'll try and go back to that question. It says, if an SHI is non-compliant and has already applied for capital grant funding, the application of the grant will be, I'm reading the wrong. Lelo says, if SHRA provides the grant of 75, it's not 75, Lelo, it's 70% per project, and the SHI has a 5-year accreditation, which is not renewed. Does it mean that the grant is forfeited to the SHI who has title over the land or what?
Okay. All right, that one is straightforward. The question is, if I've received grant funding, I've got this 5-year accreditation, but then the SHRA finds me non-compliant. It depends how non-compliant you are. If it's things that you can turn around, then you'll be allowed to turn it around. But for example, if it's really, really big things where monies have been misappropriated, or it's just a dysfunctional SHI that is committing fraudulent things, misrepresenting, the SHRA can take those units back. You do not get refunded anything in terms of the grant. They can take those units back with the debt funding, with everything. Those assets are taken and it can be given to another SHI through negotiation, whatever the SHRA decides to do. But non-compliance in terms of your rent collection and you are struggling operationally, the SHRA gives you a chance to turn things around and assist you in regards to that non-compliance. But like I'm saying, there's non-compliance and there's non-compliance. So the one I'm talking about where your stock could be taken away is really the big stuff where you've misused money or you've committed massive fraud within the institution or misrepresentation. So those are the big things where your stock can be taken. But institutional issues or operational issues, non-compliance, you normally are given time to turn it around and to improve on those non-compliant issues. I hope I've answered sufficiently.
Yeah, let me just add, because that was my response to the question as well, to say, in terms of the stock disposal, because she's also asking, or he's also asking, can SHI sell the project or something like that? And I do indicate that there is a policy document that speaks to the disposal of social housing stock. And it's not a decision that is done unilaterally by a grant recipient, in this case, an SHI or ODA. But the SHRA has to be a key participant in that decision as well. So there is a document that speaks to this issue.
And if you read, like, remember I said, start downloading your policies. It's very clear in the regulations and in the act of what happens when you want to dispose of assets.
Yeah.
So it's legislated also.
Puti has a question or comment.
Good morning, colleagues. My question, actually, I just want to understand appetite for SHRA to include new modernized ways of doing buildings. I mean, what I mean is including the likes of 4IR and green technology building. Does the SHRA actually accommodate such, or we are not at that stage?
No, that is one of the key things, is to look at technology and how to also bring, if you look at some of the green technology and environmental factors, you will see that more and more they'll look at things like water harvesting, the type of materials that you put in. But what we have found was that when you start doing green technology, in the long run, it helps, but it tends to be more expensive to do a green building. So there's that dilemma. So institutions normally will see, what can I do so that at least I'm doing something partially to look at greening and environmental issues, but generally your green buildings. But it's something that is being looked at. If somebody can come up with the green technology within costs, then I think the SHRA will be very happy to look at something like that. Yeah.
I know that in the session next week, we also have a section where we talk about design. And this it touches on where you say, how do you best design and orientate your project or building such that it is environmentally green. as a project.
Mm.
Detail.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks.
Any questions, colleagues, comments?
Yeah, I do have a comment. I don't see where I need to raise my hand. So sorry, Bro John and Sharon. Mine is just a comment, just based on observation and the presentation that Sharon made, particularly around where you find you have a nice project, but you have a wrong people who do not necessarily want a rental stock. They just wanted accommodation. So perhaps the comment there will be, you might need to dovetail the delivery of a social housing project dovetailed with other housing options, so that it's not an isolated project on its own, because that in itself, the demand for housing is high. So people, just because they see the building and they want to move out of wherever they are in Squala, they will quickly say, yeah, of course, we want and submit, while their intention is not necessarily rental. So it's quite important that we offer social housing as part of the housing option, unlike having a social housing project sitting on its own. Because the likelihood, and if we do not do our need analysis quite correctly, in terms of what our need analysis, who are we targeting? Are these people looking for houses or they are looking for rental? If we miss it right there, we might not get it correctly. So the answer to it, as part of the intervention, is to come up with a multi-pronged project or mixed income or mixed housing program that will be able to address different needs. That would be my comment.
No, absolutely. You're making a vital point. I think in the past, that was one of the mistakes that institutions made. There was this demand, everybody flocked, but the people that were in there, that went in, their objective was not to rent. So you do face those problems. So more and more, you find institutions or ODAs doing this mixed development. So that is why that needs assessment and demand study and education of communities of the various government products and communicating social housing. If you do that well and people understand, you'll find that you will get the right people into your project. But if you just say there's a project, it's ready, but you're not explaining to people and you're not doing that pre-part well, and you're not giving communities all the information, then you're going to have a problem. Because I'm telling you now, you can go to a community, 90% of them or even 100% of them don't know what FLISP is. They just know a thing like RDP, and your rental stock they know as rent to buy. Go to any community, that's what you will hear. But if we educate and give people information, you will sift out those that don't really want rental. But we have to capacitate and empower ourselves to get the right information so that we give that right information. So that point is very valid.
Cheryl, I see that there are two more hands. Mkize, important Mkize, and Puti, in that order.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, man, there is quite a lot of documents that are needed for the process of accreditation. Is there any sort of kind of models, or you call it templates, that can assist in the drawing up or design of these, of all of these documents? Sort of some guide which you can use to model your own situation, so that you produce documents that are aligned with the legislation, that are aligned with the requirements of SHRA. Is that kind of an assistance of That's all. End of my question.
John,
Right.
you want to answer that?
Yeah, a direct answer is yes. In fact, that was my next piece after we've taken all the questions. So there are certain templates that can be availed to you, sir, and anyone else who needs them. I'll just speak to who you need to liaise with in terms of getting access to those. So there are policy examples and that can be used for accreditation.
Good, brilliant,
Okay.
good. Thank you very much.
Thanks for the
There is
opportunity to ask the
somebody
question
else.
again. Yes, there is. It's put here again. I just want to find just get a point of clarity when it comes to transformation. I just want to find out if there is a regulation that has been put in place to regulate the type of service providers that we can use, being the professionals. And this is also considering the fact that if we are going to stick to the transformation part, is that the new entrants are people that don't have necessarily have a lot of experience. So I just wanted to find out there that is the regulation put in place, or we are mostly welcome to use the service providers that we feel comfortable with.
So let me come in there, Cheryl. So when you as an ODA or NSHI has been awarded the CCG, we call it CCG, Consolidated Capital Grant, you then sign a CCG contract or agreement with the SHRA. Are you still there? I'm able to
Yes.
you back.
Yeah, I'm listening.
Yeah. So in the CCG contract, there are targets in there in terms of transformation that says you need to be working with transformed service providers, whether it be professional teams and so forth. However, where we are still constrained as a SHRA is following the implementation of that. And this is why I said yesterday that when one looks at the performance of the SHRA from a transformation point of view, we are not able to enforce and ensure that we follow every rand and make sure that it achieves government objective, which is transformation. But there is that requirement, and I think it's just certainly that we don't have anyone of the colleagues who manages, who could speak with much more clarity on the CCG. But I have invited them in the next week's session, because there we'll be talking about an area of their work, which is project development and funding. So some of this can be clarified in more, given more clarity in the session next week. Overall, there is something in the agreement that you sign that says we want to see that your professional team, your contractor, and so forth are transformed.
All right, thanks.
Right. I don't see any more new hands, and I am going to then assume that everyone is happy. Colleagues, maybe my last ask is that just on the chat line there, just as a form of evaluation, because myself as a coordinator, I've got to now at the end of all this write a report, and I don't want to find myself psyching and thinking, what did the people think about this thing? Did they find it too heavy? Did really unpack the process of the SHRA for them? Did we meet expectation? So if you can, just as you did yesterday, I saw the comments yesterday were thumbing up our efforts. So just give us that feedback as well, and then I will be saving and copying it into my report, closeout report for this project. I want to conclude by the following. One is just to give you an outline of who the SHRA, how's the SHRA structured internally? Because this would assist you in determining who do you need to link up with. So within the SHRA, as I indicated yesterday, about 40 to 50 people employed here. And the organization itself is structured into 4 main business units or departments, as Cheryl had indicated yesterday. The first of the biggest unit is obviously the admin unit, wherein you find subunits such as your human resources, your legal department, your IT, your supply chain, and the marketing and communications guys, right? So all that is under admin. In that department, there wouldn't be much interfacing, but quite key because we are a government entity. And we are required to, in terms of putting work out, that some of these things are advertised broadly to the public. So ideal that you should register on the database central, what do you call CSD, which is in the I think it's National Treasury tool. But also, if you have I'm assuming, let's say you are a professional team, or you have a professional team, they do all sorts of technical stuff such as architectural work, you do such things such as QS and so forth. Ordinarily, sometimes as a SHRA, we source such services ourselves as an entity. So it will be good to register your profile with our supply chain colleagues. And I'll just give you the contact email of our supply chain manager, to whom you can, see if you can send your profile of your company and talk about your services, because they have in their procurement plan to source a whole range of services. The gentleman is Oral Ndove, and I don't know if Dudu is here. Dudu did some assistance for me the last time. Oral Ndove is the supply chain manager, and he can be found on email oral@shra.org.za. Oral is, I'll just type it up on the chat, is ORALN@shra.org.za. So that's our supply chain manager's email. In case you have a company that provides services that government would ordinarily use, including the SHRA, this is the person that you register your company's profile with, and they would source and use such contacts. The second and most important department or unit, business unit that we have within the SHRA is the Compliance, Accreditation and Regulations Unit, CAR. We call it CAR in brief or in short. And much of your inquiries relating to what we've been focusing on for the last 2 days would go to the CAR colleagues. Whether you seek an accreditation of an SHI, Mr. Mkhize, and you want those templates, these are the people that you link up with. Whether you are seeking the accreditation of a project, whether you are an SHI, already accredited SHI, and you want to just deliver a project, or you are an ODA and you just want to deliver a project, again, your application or inquiry needs to be directed to the CAR people. I'm gonna give 2 contacts. The first incumbent is gentleman Themba oh, he's just joined us last week, so I still have to learn his surname. So Themba is the specialist that is responsible for SHI accreditation process. Mr. Mkhize and anyone else who needs templates and so forth, and the application itself to apply for accreditation should write to Themba, and I'm putting Themba's email on the chat. It's Themba m@shra.org.za. So that's your champion in terms of your SHI accreditation.
Just repeat the email.
Themba M for mother.
Yes.
shra.org.za. Relating to the projects, any inquiries or submission of project applications needs to go to Miss Shilombe Mageza And I'll just put the email of Shilombe on the chat as well. So Shilombe, XILOMBE @shra.org.za. And I have put Shilombe's email as well. She's able to tell you more and send you the tools next week, and I still keep repeating this. Next week, we are going to be talking about project and project accreditation. Cheryl has given us just the top slice, the taste of it. So next week, we are going to be honing in much more in detail about project accreditation. And Shilombe, I hope that she is going to be with us as well in the room next week. But in case she's not, this is the person that you speak to. She's able to share with you the tools that you need to use in lodging the application. She's able to share with you that long list of the accreditation criteria or investment criteria and any other project accreditation related documents. So those are the CAR people. The two staff members that I've just informed you of, they also report to Mr. Gianni Vecchio, and Gianni can be accessed on gianniv@shra.org.za. It's Gianni's GIANNIV @shra.org.za. So those are the colleagues that I am amply giving you contact details of. Our landline, in fact, let me also just as well give you that. It's 274-6200. This is the reception line, and you can ask to speak to any of these colleagues that I have indicated. So that's the second department or business unit. I've said there's admin unit, department, and there is CAR department or unit. The third colleagues of the units that you find within the SHRA is a unit or a department called Project Development and Funding. And as the name suggests, these are the guys, once the project has served through CAR and has been registered and has been assessed and it has been taken through right through to council, because council is the last decision-making body. And that project has been rubber stamped by council, and council says they're happy to give this project that 100 million grant funding that Cheryl has spoken of. Then it then gets handed over from CAR, and you as the grant recipient for that project get to sign a CCG contract with colleagues in project development and funding, PDNF. There are portfolio managers there who are assigned to specific provinces. For example, if you look at KZN, there's a portfolio manager responsible for KZN, and she manages projects developing in that province. Gauteng, in its nature, I think amongst four of the portfolio managers is shared. Limpopo has its own, and so forth and so forth. But those are the guys that you interface with much more later, once your project has been given a rubber stamp and council is happy. Now you are signing on the dotted line to say, here is the government investment, go ahead and develop this thing. We are the least or the smallest of the units within the SHRA, and this is the fourth of the departments within the SHRA, called Sector Development and Transformation, SDNT. I sit in that unit. My colleague Dudu, who I saw was with us earlier, she's also sitting in that unit. We report to an exec, Mr. Dival Kukemur. Our work really is to broadly facilitate sector development efforts and projects. An example would be exactly this that we do today and yesterday. So a training program is one of the flagship programs that the unit runs We also administer, and this is where I want to focus the next part of my presentation on. We also administer a pot of money called institutional investment grant, and in that there are about 5 support grants. So this is aside, take away and leave for now the CCG, because that's a different, it's big money that's to do with your development. As Sector Development and Transformation Unit, we administer the IIG in short, and in that IIG there are 5 grants. I'll speak to those. Just take note that the first of the grants that we administer is a grant called the pre-accreditation grant. Pre-accreditation grant. There's a policy, in fact, that governs all these 5 grants I'm speaking to, and it's one of the documents that I will release to you. So I said to you that I will be sharing with you the list of restructuring zones. Remember from yesterday, I did say that I will be sending you post our session today, the chairpersons' contacts of the PSCs in various provinces. I've also said that I will share with you the PowerPoint presentation. So the 4th document that you should expect from me today is the policy on these 5 grants that I'm about to speak to. I saw that there was also a question on the recording. The recording, because it's such a heavy file, we can't email those. So we'll email you the link. And I think the link kicks you in and takes you to a YouTube Shara link where you can access this thing. So in there, we'll also send you the link to access the actual recording of this session. Now, let me speak to the grants as we conclude. The first grant, as I indicated, is a pre-accreditation grant. And this, colleagues, is a pot of money that government has put in place to say, let us assist guys who are seeking accreditation as SHIs. So how it works is that you first have to take the initiative and lodge the application with TEMBA, who have given the contact details, remember. And when that application gets received by TEMBA, he then, working with a specialist or a professional, they do an assessment of that application. That process then spits out a report that tells you, okay, we have assessed your application for an SHI accreditation, and this is what we have found you to be sitting at. Either immediately it results in you being conditionally accredited, or that report might also be a decline, as Sharon has indicated. Either way, using that report, because that's a key for us to be able to tap into this pot of money. There's about a mere, and I'll just to say a mere because the list of the grants that we administer, 100,000 that can be accessed to support an institution or aspiring institution that seeks accreditation. So if Mr. Mkize, you have applied for accreditation and you have now received the outcome and that report is able to tell us that Mr. Mkize needs to be assisted with the development of a business plan. Because when they assess that business plan that is submitted, it was a weak document or had set faults in it. Or Mr. Mkize needs to be assisted with a strategic plan or policies. So whatever that report says becomes the launching pad for us to then be able to say, okay, you look at using this pot of money to assist. In that report, though, I must also explain that it's not a given that you are going to get 100,000 just like that. One, the 100,000 does not come to you as the applicant as hard cash. It follows the supply chain process if and when EXCO approves that you may be assisted with this grant, and then follows the supply chain process where we procure a professional or a consultant to come and focus and assist you with either whatever their need may be. So there's 100,000 rands to assist just in those accreditation efforts. The second piece that the pre-accreditation grant affords us to do, and there's a separate pot of money that is set aside even under this grant. There's about 200,000 that an applicant can apply for. This is for already an accredited institution, whether fully or conditionally accredited institution, but we can see that they are still, in fact, not even fully, but conditionally accredited institution. But we can see that they still need quite a lot of support in terms of building up in-house capacity for them to manage SMSHI. So this is then, again, it comes through that report, and we're able to pick up that, okay, these are the compliance issues from compliance point of view that needs to be, you need to be assisted with. The decision to take a report to EXCO, because EXCO for us to tap into this pot of money is the body that makes that decision. I just prepare the report and I take it to EXCO to say, Mr. Mkhize's SHI or prospective SHI has applied or request. Is then that decision is then made by the executive committee of the SHRA, which is where the 4 executives from the 4 units that I've just mentioned sits on every 2-week basis. So I'm moving away from that grant, and as I say, I will be sharing with you a policy document that goes in much more detail. In fact, I'm not going to ask you to read the entire policy, but go to page 16 of that policy when I send it to you, because it gives you a beautiful summary of all the 5 grants. And then I think from page 20 up until page 30 or somewhere there, you'll see that it outlines in detail each of these grants. So I'm just giving you the synopsis of the grants. The second grant, colleagues, let me just move with speed, is the project feasibility grant money. We also administer it within the SDNT business unit. It's part of money that's been set aside to assist with project applications that have not reached a stage of readiness. We're saying, let us, instead of just packing these things on our database and our system and such that the pipeline is not moving off all these projects, let us log in this pot of money to assist and unblock some of the blockages that the project application may be facing with, maybe confronted with. So there is 500,000, R500,000 that is available for application in this regard, R500,000. It would ordinarily do not a full feasibility study. In fact, those of you who are already in the built environment space, you know that to do a full fleshed out feasibility on any given project costs far much more than just a mere 500. So this 500,000 is really intended to block or to close a few gaps in an application that has been lodged with a SHRA to say, here's a project application for a proposed social housing project, but actually it needs a very fine-tuned demand study report in there, or it actually needs a well-written traffic impact study report in there, or it actually needs to do some concept designs or a combination of these things. So we're able to, again, not necessarily release this as hard cash to you as a grant applicant. We through the EXCO, we get an approval, and through supply chain, we then procure services of an architect who then comes in and does the concept designs for your project, or an engineer who then comes and do the traffic impact study, or a market research house that then come and does the demand study report for your application. And these are the things that then are done to assist the application to move such that it gets to council for that final approval. That is a project feasibility grant. So how it works as well is that you first have to, we can't support a project that is not lodged within the SHRA. So you need to submit your project. And remember, I said the person or your champion within the SHRA who is responsible for project accreditation or project applications is Ms. Shilombe Mageza. So you lodge your application with Shilombe. Shilombe then carries out a pre-assessment. I think she works hand in hand with a colleague in project development and funding. So although I say they come in much more at a later date, at that early stage, they're able to sit and do a pre-assessment of the thing, of that application. And then when they pick up at that stage that, oh, this thing might need designs, or this thing might need a demand study, this thing might need, they're able then to, with you as an applicant, say, this is what we've picked up, but there is this grant, project feasibility grant, which SHRA can assist you to plug in the holes. And if both yourselves and the colleagues in CAR and PNF agree, then we're able to take a report to EXCO, and EXCO approves. We then go to supply chain, and supply chain appoints us the consultant or professionals to come and work with you as an applicant. So that's the second one. The third, it's a very interesting one. We call it a staff gear up grant. And this works on the following assumption. Once the project, let's say you had been approved for 500 unit project, and it's a phased in project. You are going to be first developing and taking on for management the first 100 units. This grant says, because at that point, you as an SHI, you don't at that point have the revenue streams coming in, because you are just, these are new units and there is no one who is living in those units to pay you rent. Government is saying we can pay the salary cost of those operational staff that you need for the unit take on. Does that make sense? So you then say, okay, for the unit take on of this first 100 units, I need a leasing administrator or two. I need colleagues or guys who are going to do the marketing of the units. I need guys or staff on facilities management. So you'll just then scratch it out in terms of what roles or key roles you need for the facilitation of the unit take on. And you then project it to say, for the 6 months or 9 months of these people tenanting these units, this is how much time it will take for us to tenant the 100 units, and you then project their salaries. This of the 5 grants, in fact, is the only one that gets paid as cash into the bank of the SHI. ODAs currently are not, unfortunately, eligible for this grant type. So it's only for SHI, accredited SHI, that can prove to us that there's a project that has been approved. This project is nearing completion and we're ready to take on the first units, and we need this staff body in place. The money itself does not pay for the CEO's salary, your board members' fees and things like that. So it's more to pay your cost of your operational staff. And in there, as I said, there's about R500,000 or 500,000 that can be tapped into. The fourth or second last grant type that we administer is the general capacitation grant, colleagues. It's broadly money that we use to do broadly in the sector, your research work, your capacitation, for example, such as this one, where we've had to request an expert in a particular field to come in and present a specific piece. We will use this pot of money to then do this kind of work. And someone asked a question of transformation yesterday. And perhaps I should also indicate that this is but one of the pot of monies that we use. So if you are an emerging SHI, startup, and we realize that in this SHI, you don't have, some of the key competencies or basic capacity, such as, let's say you have been approved for this project and know that for the development of the project, you must have that person who's going to manage both the contractor and the professional team, that development manager guy. So are you able to tap into this pot of money to appoint for you a development manager who then assists with the development of that first project of an SHI? And I think to a certain extent, if one looks at this, this is one of the ways in which through SHRA, through government, through SHRA, is trying to assist your new guys, your aspiring, your new guys that are just now at that first project delivery point, and they need that bit of a push or support in terms of building in-house capacity to deliver on their first project. The last of the 5 grants that we administer is what we call a remedial action grant. And I think if I'm right, both the SHIs and ODAs can apply for this one. And what its intention is, and I don't know if Cheryl mentioned this, that because government has invested 70% of public money into it, we don't simply go away and leave you to, I think Cheryl has spoken to, you are required to be reporting on quarterly basis. Every 3 months, we want to know the affairs of an SHI, if you're an SHI, and the affairs of each project that we have funded. From point of view of how are you doing with managing vacancies? Are you sitting with vacancies that are going to render you unsustainable? Are you collecting rental revenue so that you can sustain the operations of this thing? So on your reporting, quarterly reporting, we're able to pick up these things, anomalies, where we see that SHI ABC is struggling with maintenance issues. We're able to then, working with the colleagues in CAR and yourself as the grant applicant, tap into this pot of money and deploy a professional or consultant to work with you in remedying some of these performance or KPIs. So in short, colleagues, those are the 5 grants that are available to try and assist and support the efforts in the sector. I see that we are just about 5 minutes before the time we promised to close the session. So I guess at this point, with that, I can allow a few questions if there's anything else I may have not been clearer on. So let me take questions, comments, and thank you. I see everyone is taking that minute to put in a comment regarding your feedback. Thank you very much. Any questions, comments relating to the SHRA and the structure, but also the support grants? Okay, this means that I've done my job. Awesome. Guys, ladies and gents, I am so delighted. I feel within the bosoms of my heart that this has been a good session, and I hope that this has assisted to unpack the processes of the SHRA. It is one of those areas where we've received sharp criticism over the past years, that we are in obscurity as an entity of government, entity of the department, and our processes they are cumbersome and they are unknown. So this is what I hope that this has been assisted, not entirely, but has assisted to bring some of these things to the fore. On that note, I just want to say thank you to Cheryl. I sometimes suspect that if Cheryl, you were my primary or high school teacher, I would have been an A student at school. Your teaching style, no one can go wrong. So
thanks, John.
So thank you very much for again coming and assisting us with unpacking some of these things that can sometimes be unpack. And to everyone else, really for making this a success, really observing the protocols in terms of keeping on mute and coming in and participating and making it still an interactive session. I cannot thank you all enough. So I hope to see you all or some of you in the next week's session, the project packaging session. We'll be talking some of the interesting things, not only just the designs, but the money, the big monies, capital grant funding. So thank you all. You're welcome to log off the call. Can I just
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Yes,
Thank you,
yes.
John and Cheryl. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you. Bye.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Is Lesego here? Lesego? I doubt that she is. Is Lesego with us? So no, she was
Doesn't look
on
like
earlier. Okay. Because I know that when I log off.
Hello, John. Hello, John.
Mr. John, hello.
John, it's
John.
hello, John.
Hello.
Hi. Who's
Hi,
who?
John.
Okay, let's take a lady first. I can't see who it is. Is that Ntokozo?
No, John, it's Lesego.
Oh, hi, Lesego.
Yeah.
Oh no,
How
I
are
was
you?
asking about my Lesego this side, our marketing and communications person. How are you?
I'm all right.
Good. Did
Okay,
you find
then.
the
No,
session-
thank you.
Did you find the session helpful though?
Very helpful. Very informative.
Awesome.
Yes.
Great.
Thank
Hopefully it's
you.
not the last time we'll see you again knocking on the doors.
No, it won't be the last
Okay.
time.
Excellent. Ms. Musi?
Thank you.
Yes, greeting everyone. Thank you for presentation. I just want to ask one question. Are we automatically on the next session since we were part of this first session? Or do we need to reapply?
No, it's not an automatic one. I think when you, depending on how you responded, because some people RSVP directly to my email and Dudu's email with their details and indicating which sessions they want to attend, and we added them under that list. Some people were sent the link, the monkey survey link, where they responded and chose the sessions that they are attending. So I'm not sure which sessions you chose other than this one. If you did not choose next week's one, look, it's not too late. You can drop me an email with the rest of your details so that I can add you into the next week's session as well.
I'm sending the same the information that I've sent on the first session.
Okay, that should help. Yeah.
Or is it possible to just apply once for the whole session?
You can apply once for the whole all the sessions. So you just one email saying, okay, John, I'm interested in attending introduction to social housing, project packaging, property management, and so you just list them so that, because each session has its own different list, so that when we receive your email or RSVP, we are able to then say, okay, this person needs to be registered in all these 5 things, or this person is only going to be registered in only this one. Okay. You know what I mean? So I can't remember. I don't remember how yours came. If you registered for all 5, then you should be on the list for all 5. But if it was just this one and subsequent to you attended this, you think that it would add value for you to attend the next one, which is the project packaging, then maybe what you need to do is just to say, can you add me to the project packaging one? Because initially when you responded, you did not indicate that you want to include what you got.
Okay. Okay, no problem. Thank you.
Babu Mapena, Wilfred.
Hi, Mr. John, how are you?
Finding yourself, sir.
Thanks, Manir. Just by the way, I just thought, let me take this opportunity to thank you as well for a brilliant presentation and good work.
Thank you.
The last RFP that came out, which was in May, our group, did respond to that, but we kind of haven't really been getting consistently any feedback as to where that process is until this training program was announced. I just needed clarity with that process, which was put out there, and it closed on the 29th of May.
This is an RFP for what, if may ask?
The social housing development for projects for accreditation applications.
Oh, so was this where, because I know there was a call for proposals on prospective social housing projects.
Yes.
Yeah, I think, look, I'm not the process owner. Ms. Shilombe and Gianni are the two of my colleagues that I know are responsible for that process. I do know that even after the closing date, there was talks between our department and theirs to say they've received quite a lot of, and there was this pre-assessment work that they needed to do in each one of them. That's what's the last I heard of that.
Okay.
I can, Mapena, if it does assist, if you don't mind giving me your email, write to both Gianni and Ms. Marquez and just request an update if you say you are one of those that submitted and responded to that request proposal.
Okay.
And then I'll include you in the thing, and then they should then be able to respond directly to yourself. What is your email?
Okay, it's Ronnie M at Zamorfo.
Oh, I think I've got that. Okay.
Yeah, you
remember seeing that. Okay. Cool. So I will what you may call take up a query with them. In fact, glad to see you, because I wanted to clarify something. You are also in the session for next week, or did you do the October one?
No, I did all of them because
okay.
Yeah, with my team. Yeah, all of them.
Okay, cool. Sweet. Okay, now then let's just get the colleagues in compliance and accreditation to assist with your queries.
Okay, that will be appreciated, Dr. Mfokeng. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Yeah.
Cheers,
guys.
Sebeke bangibiza la ngibuza umbuzo omuhle kabi and out of that question, yeah, gave good clarity.
Baba Mkhize.
Yes. Yeah. No, ngithokozile John ngale mbuzo wami lo eniuphendule kahle. It gives me confidence now to approach.
I'm glad this could assist. And beyond just your attempts to get accredited, remember there is also the pre-accreditation grant money that you can also, if it comes out and it says no, it's a decline, you can also tap into for more assistance there.
Yes, no, definitely. I think it's an enormous assistance, The support system, it's excellent. It's excellent, In fact, I would say it's unprecedented in this country, The amount and the level of assistance with this project, this program.
No, I think this is good feedback.
No, next week ngiyafuna ukuthi ngi-attend, John. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah, basically ngithumelele i-question because bengekho clear ukuthi konje wawukhona kule besenze ngo-October or sikufake kule next week also. So ukhona for next week.
Oh, great. Right. Great. I would really appreciate mahle lama sessions there. enriching and eye-opening as well. Uzokwazi ukwenza zonke izinto from an informed position.
That's right. Umsebenzi omkhulu is that once you have received this information, it's just putting these things into action. In fact, what I also need to indicate to colleagues, but I see that there's still some people in the room, that when you look at social housing and how that program is currently performing, provinces like Gauteng, provinces such as KZN, especially when you look around KZN, Durban, Pietermaritzburg area, were relatively fine there from meeting targets delivery point of view. But the country and the provinces such as your Free State, your Limpopo, your Mpumalanga, they are still falling behind, which is saying to us that there's a need for new SHIs, new ODAs coming in and delivering projects in such facilities as well. So then lies an opportunity, when one looks, because in this current government term of 5 years, from 2014 to 2019, so 2029 to 2024, the target is that we've been given, and I want to also say it's a mere 30,000 to deliver 30,000 social housing units throughout the country. And each province, of course, has a target in terms of how many. Some surpass it, it's well and good, but some have always underperformed. Now, Northern Cape is one of those that I think we still need to push much capacity in. Free State is one of those where we need to still push much capacity in. Eastern Cape, I think better performance is happening around East London, Port Elizabeth. But when you look at areas such as Umtata, which is also one of the restructuring zones, there is a challenge there. So there is need for capacity there as well. So it's still quite the market is not saturated, from performance point of view when one looks at the performance of the program broadly.
Which then means, you also need to double up your effort in terms of promotion on the ground. And then bring people on board to workshops like this. And I think that could activate, activities in those provinces that are currently, down.
Performance, last year and the year before last, I think with the COVID thing, we've just been restricted to, but last year we were on road shows doing particular things.
Good.
And so forth. So we hope that once this thing starts to ease, we will be targeting specifically these places that I mentioned, Umtata and so forth, and see if we can pull in people that are.
And then the whole concept, it's so good. It's still relevant. Transformation. It's along with the whole concept of democracy. We are a democratic state, and really, programs of this sort are absolutely necessary, essential. Where you transform the lives of people. Cheryl has put this clearly across. The move from the apartheid kind of a situation to a democratic state. There must be a clear difference. You see, in with the past. It's really inspiring and encouraging.
That's right.
To be a game changer, and contribute in change. No, thanks very much, John.
Okay, guys, I'm gonna close the call. I just want to remove a few people. Vusmuthi Babu Mabena, may I see that you wanted to just say something before I close?
Yeah, very quickly,
Okay.
Dr. Mfuke, very quickly. Yeah, it's just that, you know, having applied for, you know, this accreditation process, and in the process, you know, you kind of pick up and develop some projects. How do we process them in terms of submission of those new projects to say, here's